So today's session is going to be on the life sketches of the yoga gurus. Mainly it's for L2. L2 there are I think 4 or 5 gurus details has been as part of the syllabus, and for L1 is more of the revision. Okay, so it's an interesting topic. You always get 1 or 2 questions on this. Okay. So I'd like to welcome Satish. Okay, to start his presentation. Satish has recently passed his YCB L2 exam, and we are doing actually L1, L2 together. So it's nice to actually have Satish to really kind of share his thoughts on this topic. Over to you, Satish.
So what I have done is, for a simple understanding, I've put across their birth, their locations and all those things. These are the basic data points. Though we may not have any questions related to these particular things, the time of birth or date of birth and all those, or their father, mother, maximum the questions that may come up is like, what is there is that they found. Okay, it could be the founder of Ashtanga Yoga or the Shankara Mat and all those. Those are the kind of questions that may come in. Generally, in my experience at least, this topic will have maximum of 2 questions to 3 questions. Okay, I was not blessed to have that. Somehow Dhananjay was blessed to have that 1 question on this. Okay, so I will share this particular slide with everyone. Okay, first I'll go by the chronological orderly. Okay, much of these are L2 specific, except for Sage Patanjali, because Maharishi Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga is part of your level 1 also. So you would definitely have this particular input about this Patanjali, Sage Patanjali also is very important. Okay. So here we are looking at the Sage Patanjali's teachings. We all know that he gave us this Ashtanga Yoga, and the shloka which I recited in the beginning is a poem or a recitation by King Bhoja, complimenting the services of Sage Patanjali, in appreciation of Sage Patanjali. He had mentioned it, and the shloka also talks about thanking Sage Patanjali for giving us yoga to treat our bodily problems or defects in our body, to correct our grammar through whatever the text that compositions that he had done on grammar, and as well as the treatise that he made on the Ayurveda. Okay, if you look at the Sage Patanjali's history or his study or his or his lifeline, you would have seen that he was a student of the grammarian Sage Panini. Okay, and that's how he was able to give more treatise on that particular Sanskrit grammar that was given by Sage Panini. Okay, and in addition to that, that was a time. Okay, I'll give one more pointer also in this important. Much of these inputs that I have gathered here and what I'm going to read out from my notes that I have made out also are not part of any Wikipedia link. I've tried to go through many of these materials that are available in various portal websites, and from there I've gathered this and given it. So some of them will be specific to the exam point of view. Some of them are good to know about these particular gurus. Okay, so do not only think about from the exam point of view that the inputs are required, but there are points which may be required for us to know about these gurus that whom we are learning on. Okay, and why they have found a place in this YCB's of the syllabus itself. Okay, so coming to this point of Sage Patanjali, he was a disciple of Sage Panini, so the grammarian impact was there, so he could write a treatise on grammar as well. Okay, and that was a time, during this time of Sage Patanjali, there was also an impact of the Buddhism as well as the Jainism and all, and that made him to come out with some kind of a structured documentations, and that's how your Ashtanga Yoga, which is a structured scripture for the yoga, that would be brought in. Okay, and he could take out some of those good aspects that were available, which are not part of your Vedas or Upanishads and all those, but still he could pick up these from the rest of the ones and give a structured document to us. So this is the first, as far as the yoga as a system itself, he is the first one to science or an art, or whichever way we call it as. Okay, that's why we call him as a father of classical yoga or Raja Yoga. The yoga that he had propagated is called as Raja Yoga. Okay, some of the key books that he wrote were these. There are many others, but these are the major ones that which I wanted to share with you all. Okay. The next one in the line is Sage Adi Shankara, Adi Shankaracharya. He was also called as Bhagavad Pada or Jagat Guru. Okay, a very, very short life time that he had, and he was the pioneer in propagating the Advaita philosophy, and that is again a challenging time. He had a very, very challenging childhood. Okay, at about 5 years he lost his father, and he started learning Vedas and Upanishads within 2 years. By 8 he had completed learning Vedas and Upanishads, and somehow he was able to force, we could say, or convince his mother that he could take a sannyasa. But at the same time he promised his mother that he would be with her during her last days. Okay, and from there, at the age of 8, he moved out of his birthplace is in the current day Kerala. It is his birthplace is located. Okay, from there he moved towards the banks of Narmada, and he found his guru Govinda Bhagavad Pada over there, who taught him Upanishads and many other scriptures. And over the next 8 years, till his 16 years, he learned a lot of these Vedas, Upanishads in depth. Okay, and at 16, his guru wanted him to move out of that place and travel the entire country to spread the message, the Vedas and Upanishads. And that's how he started traveling the length and breadth of it. He is one sage who had traveled the length and breadth to spread. And he also made it a point that every time he goes to a place and engages with people with the knowledge on the Upanishads and Vedas, and if he is able to win over them, he made them his disciple. Okay, and that's how he had got so many disciples. He was able to form over a period of time, and he was able to set up about 4 different Shankara mutts in the country. Okay, starting from one in the Dwaraka, one in the east, and one in the south also he was able to form. Okay, he lived all for only 32 years, but by that time he had written a lot of hymns, a lot of one of the famous ones which I like is the Bhajagovindam. Okay, and the recitation of Bhajagovindam in the voice of India's Nightingale, M.S. Subbalakshmi, if you hear it out, you'll be mesmerized with that. Anyone would get mesmerized with that. Okay, and he also wrote a lot of commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and all those. Some of them like Viveka Chudamani. Okay, Saundarya Lahari is something that he has composed. Okay, these are many of them that his prowess on Sanskrit was shown through this, whatever books or the text that he was able to write and compose. He was able to spread that message of Vedanta or the Upanishads. His point was like, there is only one Brahman. There is one absolute reality. Okay, there is only one. That's what the philosophy had propagated throughout his teachings. Very, very short life of 32 years, but he was able to spread the message that he was born to. He has achieved it, and his teachings are still relevant to us and are being followed by many of these Shankara mutts, is what the input I have on this. Okay, the most important one which he concentrated on out of the 4 principal Mahavakyas, his point, which I also I didn't relate to it till the time I studied this yoga textures and all, was the Tat Tvam Asi. Okay, you are one. This is something which I used to see when I go to the temple in Kerala, the Sabrimala, where the writings were there, but I never realized it that it was this from there that he has picked up, and it was something that Adi Shankara had mentioned about this as part of the Mahavakyas, that he had mentioned this. And after reading the textures and attending all our sessions and all, I was able to find and relate all this. Okay, so this is the second guru that both of these Sage Patanjali's part would have been relevant for level 1. For level 2, Adi Shankara's inputs would be relevant. Okay. The third one in this is Sage Ramana Maharishi. He had a good lifetime. Okay, and he was born in this place called somewhere in a small town near Madurai. Okay, and he was also born to be a saint. Okay, his interest in studies and others were pretty less, and one of the major things that he had in him was to get into a meditative state at his will whenever he wanted. So it became pretty easy for him to just sit like and get into a deep meditative state without knowing what is happening around in the world. Okay, he also had a difficult early life where he lost his father very early, and then he moved on to live with his uncle. At about when he was 16 years old, he came to know about this particular location called Tiruvannamalai, okay, which is famous for the Arunachala temple, or a Shiva temple, we could say. Okay, he came to know about this, and between this time, he would be like he felt like he wanted to get into the meditative state, and people are questioning him or were unhappy with him. He will just go to a nearby temple, and just behind the murti, he will go sit and get into a trance or a meditative position. Okay, so that's how he used to practice, or he used to live with this meditative state for a long time. And by 16, he had taken a call that he need to move out of his the schooling, the studies, the education, and all those. So he left his town and went towards this temple town called Tiruvannamalai. Okay, after a good struggle of about more than 15 days or close to a month, he finally landed somewhere near the temple and started doing the same practice of meditation inside the temple, outside the temple, without even bothering about the food or anything that he may need it. With so much of help and others, in about 2 years' time, he got into. He also did not get a proper guru to teach him anything on the yoga or Upanishads and all those, whatever we may call scriptures on. He just started practicing this meditation in a deep state on his own, and some of them a shelter. One of the sage Seshadri Swamigal, who was there in that particular location, gave him protection from others also, because in his meditative state, people used to come and disturb him, make pranks on him and all those stuff. Okay, so somebody gave him protection to practice this, and over a period of time, people started coming to him. He was not giving any answers to the queries of the people when they come to him with a lot of doubts and all those, but his silence helped them in learning their solutions for their respective problems, and people found him to be a Swami who could help them remove many of their problems. And he was not a practitioner of the normal yoga asanas that we may have come across. Okay, but his Jnana Yoga was something which attracted him, or which is the reason why he is considered to be one of the gurus for YCB, and YCB feels like we should also need to learn about him. Okay, two incidents. One of the incidents that triggered him was like before coming into this, the Thiruvannamalai, the location, once at his home, he went into a deep meditative state, we may call it, as a state where he, absorbed himself internally with it, and turned into a corpse kind of a dead body kind of a position. Okay, so people around him thought that he is dead. For quite some time, he was in that state, and then he came back into life, which gave a big relief for others. But at the same time, it also triggered a thought for him that uh, when I'm dead, is it me who is dead or the body is dead? Okay, this is something which has triggered him, and this is the famous philosophy of Swami Ramana Maharishi. Is like, who am I? Am I the body? If the body is dead, am I dead? That's a famous terminology of Ramana Maharishi, which is used as related to him, and the queries also comes about him. Okay, this is about before his walking out of home towards the sannyasa part. Okay, and he had a very, very tough time in setting up into the sainthood. And there was one Gopala Muni who used to come to meet him, who got enlightened by silence or the meditative postures of Ramana Maharishi. Gopala Muni was already a Sanskrit scholar, but when he came to meet up with Ramana, he felt like he had been able to he got elevated in his stature itself. And so he started talking to him or giving him inputs about the Upanishads, Vedas, and all those. So that's how Ramana Maharishi also got attracted to many of these, Vedas and Upanishads and all, because till that point of time, he did not have a formal education into all this. Unlike the sage Patanjali story or whatever you would have seen in Adi Shankara's case also. In the case of Swami Ramana Maharishi, none of these happened. Okay, so over a period of time, after he started his sainthood, and he started his life with it, and people started coming in, he learned, or rather he heard these things, and from that he got into all this. So with that help of all this knowledge also, he composed two translation of Adi Shankara's Viveka Chudamani and Atma Bodha. He did that. But if you look at his history, he has not written any books on his own. Much of the books and other things are written by his disciples from whatever teachings he has done. Once again, in his teachings also, he doesn't do a lot of talking, very silent and a meditative posture. His ashram got formed much, much later. 1879, his ashram got formed sometime in 1922, in the same around the same vicinity of that hill, Thiruvannamalai hill itself. He had formed his ashram. Okay, but one of the important point that he would mention is the state of Turiya. Like, what is the difference between your dream and the waking up state? Where he used to quote the story of Raja of Janak also. Okay, where there was one Raja Janak, who in his dream, actually it is, to us it is a dream, but he started feeling that he goes into a war or a fight with some people, and he loses, and he gets trapped in a location where he doesn't get food or water for a long time. And finally, after a long fight, he manages to get a broken bowl to get some water. But before he could have water in it and drink it, that bowl also breaks. Okay, that breaks, and because of which his thing continues, and he wakes up in a state of shock, and he's not able to understand which is real. The one suffering that he was there in the dream was real, or what he is now currently as Raja is real. So he started posing questions to people, asking them whoever can clear this doubt can will get the reward, but otherwise they will be jailed. And there are so many people that he had jailed because they were not able to answer his doubt. So there was one person by name Ashtavakra, okay, whose father was also jailed. He came in and he talked to the Raja and said, like, if you want, you can explain the dream to me and I'll give you the answer, or I can go ahead and give you the answer right away. So there, Ashtavakra says like both of these are same. There is no different state of a dream state and a sleep state. And this is what Ramana Maharishi mentions in his Turiya state, called as the three states: the waking, dream, and sleep. All he mentions is the dream is a shorter stage and your waking up is a longer one. Okay, so this is what he had mentioned it, and it was a very elucidate story. He explains to the people, and this was part of his Ramana Maharishi's history. That if you would have seen, this is also forming one of the part of it. Okay, his teachings are more of jnana. There were no asana kind of yoga that he would have propagated, right? Anybody has any other point to mention in any of these things? Dhananjay or anyone you have seen any missing
One
point that you want to
question
mention?
about Raman Maharshi. As far as I know, he has not written any book, right?
Correct. He is
Just,
not. He did translation of 2 books only. That's all.
so he did the translation himself.
Yeah. He did the translation. Those 2, that Viveka Chudamani and Atma Bodha, are the 2 Tamil translations that he did from the Sanskrit.
Okay.
And some of them in some similar translations that he did in Telugu, in Malayalam and all. But his prowess in the knowledge is more in Tamil, as well as maybe of English also. But he has not composed or he has not written any books. Okay, and much of his books on him or about his teachings and other things are done by his disciples only. So here again, if at all you would have questions on the this particular thing, your questions could be those of his philosophy. Okay, who am I, or am I the body? The body is dead, and am I dead? One of this could form as a question. Otherwise, you may not see much of questions, because there is not going to be any question from the examination point of view. There will not be any questions on their year of birth and death and all those. Okay, and looking at these 2, Ramana Maharishi and Aurobindo, it's almost in a similar time period. If you would see, if you notice, both of them had similar timelines. Okay, and they lived around the same time. And as on date, if you look at it, both their ashrams are just about 100 kilometers apart. That is by nature, it has been blessed to be so. But they were born in 2 different locations. They may not have met each other also. One important aspect about Ramana Maharishi also was like, he is one philosopher who has not traveled out of his location. He didn't go out of his location, did not do any travel outside his place, even to the main cities that he would have traveled. He has not done any travel. Right? Some disturbance, you could mute it. The next is Sri Aurobindo. There is a very interesting story about which we are going to see in the next 3 of them. Okay, these are to our lifetime. We could say that very closer to our in the last 100 years that they would have lived or they are being there. Okay, so they had a lot of impact of this British lifetime and the richness and all. Sri Aurobindo moved out of India from his, he was born in Kolkata. He moved to England when he was 7 years old. For till his 14 years or even 17 years, he was there in London only. He studied, he acquired all his degree. He got selected to the Indian civil services, but the last positioning that he completed, because of which he lost that. But that was a time that he met the Maharaja of Baroda, and who called him to work in his empire, and he moved on to Baroda. So this was the period between 1893 to 1906. He was in Baroda. A very, very significant period during which he learned many Indian languages, and that was a time he learned about yoga as well. He got introduced to this yoga as a concept, following up also. He started doing this. He is not only remembered as a yoga guru, but at the same time, he was also a freedom fighter. So between the period 1906 to 1910, he had spent a lot of time in using these knowledge of these Vedas, Upanishads, and all. He tried to imbibe this or teach this to the countrymen as well as, and also inspire people for the freedom movement. Okay, for about close to 4 years, he did he edited magazines. He wrote a lot of books also at that point of time, but he didn't find the political movement as something of his calling. And around 1910, he decided to move out of Kolkata and leave the freedom movement itself. Okay, and that was a time that he moved from Kolkata to Pondicherry. That could be because of more than the land side, it could be more because of the sea route that he would have taken also, being on the same coastal region that he would have reached over there. But again, in 1910, after reaching Pondicherry for nearly about 3 to 4 years, he was almost alone with one or two of his friends or disciples. He started preaching about this yoga, and his concept of integral yoga or mental yoga is a synthesis. He had always mixed all of them into one single, like the karma, all these other yogas that you would have learned. Okay, so he wanted to bring all of them together and then form his own philosophy with that. But he was able to get people into the belief of yoga and the synthesizing of this whole concept itself, and belief in the yoga as a concept to for their life development. Okay, he had a very good life between the period 1914 to 1950, his lifetime. His life was good enough. He had good amount of disciples. Around 1926 or so, he formed his the Aurobindo Ashram also he was able to form. And later on, it was run by a mother who had joined him to preach the philosophy and spread the message of yoga as well as this spiritual messages. Okay, he has written a lot of books. His knowledge, whatever he between 1880 to 1906, during his time in Baroda, he had written so many books. And there are about close to 16 books that he would have written, which had essays on Gita, the yoga, and so many of books. Okay, so he had written, and this is about Sri Aurobindo. Very little as far as the examination point of view. Yes, we may get something on his supramental or synthesis. What is the yoga that he was preaching? So one of these three may be given because it's only one mark, so they may not go into details of what he taught, but at least which of these three, or one of them they will pick it up and say that was integral yoga part of Aurobindo's teaching or philosophy or not. Okay, kind of question. That
Aurobindo's Auroville in Pondicherry. So I think I personally visited it, and it is one of the best places you should visit whenever you get chance. Very nice place, and they have
that is
dome-like structure.
So correct. And in fact, that is, I would consider still as a crime which I have done, where I had lived closer to both locations. Okay, Aurobindo, Auroville, or rather the Ramana Maharishis. And I have heard of people who have been followers of Ramana's teaching, Sri Ramana's teaching also. And I had neighbors who used to visit Auroville quite often. But I still consider it as a crime that I have not visited any of these locations. Okay, and now after learning the yoga in the last 1 year, I get to know more about them and all those. In fact, for this particular presentation also, I spent time to understand all this. It's not only the yoga, but they have also come into education as one of the initiatives that they've taken. They have schools who are spread in the country. He has the Auroville or the Aurobindo Ashram has schools for in many places in India. The next is Swami Vivekananda, another equivalent to what he called Sri Adi Shankaras. very small, very limited lifetime he had, but very good achievements. Okay, and in fact, in the modern world, he was the one who took us beyond the boundaries, we could say. Okay, the English saying goes, no, that good things come in very small quantity, and these are the ones. They are those philosophers who came, who conquered the world with their knowledge and the way they took us through. Okay, he also had very good life. Okay, uh, he started getting into the kind of a situation in his early days, maybe around his 15-16 years. He started losing belief in God, and that was a time when he met his future guru, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Okay, uh, so when he met, he'd heard a lot of stories about Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Sharda Devi. They did not have any separate ashram or anything at that point of time. They were at this Dakshineshwar temple only, Kali temple, and he met him. Okay, when he asked him, like, have you seen God? Okay, uh, so the immediate answer that he got from Sri Ramakrishna was like, yes, I have seen in the full form as I see you. And that created an impact for Narendranath. His early name was Narendranath. That created an impact for him, and that was a time then he decided that he would devote all his time towards this guru that he has found. And this is exactly where the first slide which said, like, a guru, who is a guru? Who takes you through the knowledge, takes you out of the darkness. And this is what Ramakrishna Paramahamsa played a role in the life of Narendranath. In fact, the whole Ramakrishna Mutt and other things were not immediately formed or anything. Okay, over a period of time, due to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's bad health, he was brought into the Kolkata township, and he was there in the somewhere outside the city only. Around his time of his death only, Vivekananda or Narendranath took the vow to become a sannyasi, and all those who served along with him, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, during his last days, became the disciples. And that was a time he felt like he is going to become a sannyasi and start this life itself, and spread the message. Before, in fact, his whole Ramakrishna movement started off much later. In fact, after his visit to 1893 to Chicago for that religious conference, post that only, that was one of the time that he utilized not only preaching the Hinduism, but also to collect the required finances for the movement that he was thinking. So his point of view, more from then the religious side also, it was for educating the youth and giving them the right path. Okay, so he also propagated a lot on the Vedanta. So the way that he expounded Veda for the understanding of the youth, that's why he was given that he is the founder of Nava Vedanta or Neo Vedanta. Okay, his yoga concept had all this. It had, out of all these you would have seen, he is the one who had worked on all the yogas, the Jnana Yoga, the Bhakti Yoga, and pranayama was one of the important aspect that he had mentioned about. He used to mention that in his one of his lines that he had mentioned, to know the real nature, okay, of prana and restraining. Okay, it pranayama is what? That is what he explains in it, like, to know the real nature of prana and restraining it is called, okay, the power of pranayama. It is the power of pranayama he had mentioned. Okay, and he also mentions that it gives an immense power, infinite power for human once you are able to attain or able to practice this pranayama in a perfect manner. Okay, this is something which he had, out of all his teachings on the yoga, pranayama is one aspect that he had put more emphasis on. Okay, and then comes his speech that he did in the World Religious Conference in 1893. 1893, yes, 1893, and post which he was called as The Orator by Divine Earth. Okay, by Divine Right, I'm sorry. The Orator by Divine Right. And he was also called as messenger of Indian wisdom to the Western world. Okay, so during this time, after spreading the message or this, he stayed back there for 3 more years to earn enough money for his movement of Ramakrishna Math, and he came back in the year 1897. He started the Ramakrishna Math. And one good thing in my life, which also had the negative point, is like I am an alumni of Ramakrishna Math. From my 6th to my 12th grade I did, but unfortunately we were not taught much of the teachings of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or Swami Vivekananda's, or it got drained in our during our school days. It did not reach us. Okay, I am reading about more about this Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Swami Vivekanand much after the school days only now. Okay.
Yeah, but Satish, just to digress the topic, there is a reason, and as per government, earlier government, okay, they have planned to actually teach any religious text in any school book. In fact, I know one ISKCON temple who's that in India the laws are so any college and say that I'm going to talk about the Gita. It is illegal. That could be reason. And maybe now current government trying to kind of reverse it, but the laws were so much kind of I would not say the anti-Hindu but anti-Sanatan. So what he used to do is that he will talk about how actually you should get life skills, and he will talk Gita about it without mentioning name of the Gita, name of the Krishna, name of anything. Okay, he has to actually taught the principle. He said that he is walking on the kind of tightrope, and you actually that could be the reason. That could be the reason when you are affiliated government school. Okay, you have to go by law, and unfortunately our laws are not kind of pro Hindu or pro Sanatan.
Correct, exactly. You had mentioned this, and in fact, the school that we studied though belonged to the Ramakrishna Math, but it was a government affiliated, so it cannot go beyond a certain point. So till it was a private school, for 5th grade, it was a private school. So they used to take those children, the 5th graders, to the meditation hall and teachings of Ramakrishna or Swami Vivekananda and all. But beyond that, it becomes a government affiliation, so we were not. Most importantly, in fact, if you look at it, in India, his movement gave us education to the masses, and he was able to. This is one of the most important aspects that he wanted to spread, was take education to the unreached, we could say. So we had schools for boys, we had schools for girls separately, which used to be called as Sharda Devi Vidyalaya. And then we had colleges, okay, the higher grade undergraduate and postgraduate, for which we had colleges, which was named after Swami Vivekananda. So today in the country, we have Ramakrishna Math, or the Ramakrishna Mission, they call themselves has these education related initiatives, and they have been influencing lot of students. Leave aside the thoughts in the spiritual or the Hinduism, but they were instrumental in giving education to the unreached, we could say. Those who could not afford to it could get education because through this particular movement. In that way, I strongly feel that Swami Vivekananda's vision and his vision with which he started the whole Math and that Ramakrishna Mission has reached a stage. Okay, I'm not sure many of you would know former Indian Army Chief General Sundarji was an alumni of this Ramakrishna Mission school only during his days. Okay, so one of the book, after once I started going through this particular session, I started going through all this. Now I had found that there is one important book all of us, the corporate yogis or people aspiring to become yogis and yoginis, need to read a book written by Swami Vivekananda on the Raj Yoga. Okay, so that is one thing which we would all have to read. I think Dhananjay, through his contacts, he had shared a PDF also of that book. Okay, so that is one book which should all have at least a copy. whenever you get time, do spend to read through those, some of those topics also. Then in the last and final guru that we are reading is Swami Dayanand Saraswati. His life is also in compared to the others. The last three we are seeing, like Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo, or Swami Vivekanand, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, all of them come under not on the difficulty of life, but they've all been well-off families. They've been brought up well. In spite of that, they have moved towards these philosophies, as well as preaching and taking education or upliftment, or reaching with this yoga and the Vedas and Upanishads and all, taking it to the masses. So that's the different side of a story that we're looking at. We look at Swami Ramana Maharishi or Adi Shankara. Adi Shankara anyway was a born saint, we could say. Maybe he was born to complete what he had left in his earlier birth, is what I would urge. I would look at it from that point of view of Adi Shankara. So Swami Dayanand Saraswati was also born in an affluent family. Till about 14 years or so, he also had, in fact, in one of his, a religious event, it was a Mahashivratri, during which, when he was looking at, the all day long the satsang was going on, and he saw a small mouse or something which was taking away the prasad and moving around the Shiva's, idol. He felt like if the Shiva as an idol could not, as a god, he could not protect his own prasad, how is he going to protect us? So he stopped belief in the god or idolatry kind of worship. And he also was denouncing, that's why I mentioned this word, denounce idolatry and ritualistic worship. He denounced those practice of doing all those karmas and kriyas and all those as per the Vedas or the Upanishads or Saint and all. He denounced that also. But at the same time, he always respected the authority of Vedas. He did not question the existence of Vedas, and what are the message that was taught in Vedas also, he did not question it. Okay, so I have mentioned it here, like his teachings or his philosophies were Veda, Satyam, and Brahmacharyam. Okay, he was in the current day Gujarat. He was born. Okay, and from there he moved towards Mathura, and there he learned Upanishads under a saint called Swami Virajananda, and from there he started working on his guru wanted him to preach whatever his learnings on the Vedas and Upanishads to the world, and that's how he started working on this the entire movement and spreading of the message on this. So though he was known more from the political side of all those women's right and other activities that he would have done, but he also had a lot of impact on the yoga as a culture. Okay, and particularly the bhakti yoga and the karma yoga and all those, not on the asana type of yoga that he would have we would have all looked upon us. Okay, because as on day when we say yoga, we all relate it to the asanas and pranayamas and all, but there is the other side, is the jnana yoga and the bhakti yoga, and which is where the movement that he had been part of, and he had been spreading that. Okay, he also had a very difficult last year, but at the same time he had formed this during his lifetime, he formed this Arya Samaj, spread the message on the Vedas and all those. Through Arya Samaj, he was reaching out to people, okay, to spread the message on the Vedas. Okay, so there was one particular thing that he used to mention, okay, is like Gayatri mantra is the best method for meditation. This is one thing which so this is where the yoga part of his life comes in. The meditation part, he says, like, Gayatri mantra is the best method for meditation. Okay, that was one thing which his message was. Second is Uh, he considered Vedas as the true ones, and he considered Shuddha Jana, Shuddha Karma, Shuddha Bhakti are the pious Triveni. This could be one of a tricky question, but generally we don't expect these kind of tough questions to come. Maybe when we come to level 3, we may have this, because it's the same set of gurus that we learn in all the 3 levels. But as far as him, Swami's words, he had considered Shuddha Jana, Shuddha Karma, Shuddha Jnana, Shuddha Karma, and Shuddha Bhakti, or the pious Triveni. This is a message that which he had mentioned. And apart from this, he also mentioned something like without jnana and karma. Why he mentioned this as a Triveni? Without jnana and karma, your bhakti becomes gaudy. Without bhakti and karma, your jnana becomes invaluable. So that is where he was trying to mention that these 3 are very important, and that is where he preached out to the people also. Okay. I think I have covered on this part as well. Okay. One point about Swami Dayanand Saraswati is one. Okay. He had mentioned about 3 entities. Okay. So like what we have seen in the Sankhya Yoga, you would have seen in other yogas and all, Sankhya Darshanas and all. He had mentioned about something called Traitavad. There are 3 entities in this universe. One is God, the creator. Second, Jiva, the individual soul. And third, Prakriti, the nature. This is the Traitavad that he mentions. He had brought in this particular topic or a headline called Traitavad, number 1. Number 2, he also says like Jivatma has 2 states. The one state to experience the pleasures, pains, love and hatred is one state. The other state is free and independent of all this and stable. And that is what he would want us to do it. We are in the first stage, okay, and we aim to go through with all these readings and all. Over a period of time, we want to attain the stage of the second one, which he was mentioning. Okay, with this, I end the topic on the gurus, yoga gurus, right?